Just when you thought Playtime couldn't get any worse, they managed to surprise us at every corner. In this new orientation book, we learn even more about the horrible conditions the toys were subject to. Some of these are so extreme and cruel that it's surprising it ever made to the final game. A really interesting picture we come across in the orientation book seems to be hand-drawn by one of the orphans in Playcare. In the middle of drawing stands a young girl with brown hair. She's hunched over slightly, with her hands up by her face, and blue tears falling from her eyes. The girl is surrounded by 11 Catnap dolls, all with spooky dark eyes and hollowed-out mouths. Across the bottom of the picture, the child wrote, "I don't like Catnap and his friends. I see him everywhere. I can't escape him." As you may recall, Catnap's job was to watch over Playcare and make sure the orphans would be able to fall asleep. Catnap would do this by emitting a red gas into the room. However, we learned that when Catnap released the red gas, it would sometimes fail to put kids to sleep. Instead, it caused hallucinations and nightmares. Catnap has several counterparts created by Playtime, known as the Smiling Critters. We believe that the orphan is referring to this group when she writes that she doesn't like his friends. Do you guys remember the case of Payne, the orphan who later turns into Mommy Longlegs? It has striking similarities to the orphan's drawing that we see in the orientation book. Claire Harper, an employee at Playtime Co., had reported that Marie had seen terrible nightmares after inhaling the red gas. Could the orphan's drawing and the case of Payne be one and the same? Let's take a look at another few pages from the orientation book that we found particularly interesting. The first section reads, "Whenever the orphans are not engaged in organized activities like schooling or the game station, this is where they go to play, read, or sleep." There are separate boys and girls dormitories decorated in a Victorian style. The modern world is a hectic and dangerous place, so why not let our orphans grow up in a better, more simple time? Remember that this orientation book is meant to be a handbook for new employees. Therefore, it's not strange to get a description about the orphanage housed in the Playtime factory. What is strange, however, is Playtime Co.'s choice in keeping the Playcare facility in a Victorian style. It is likely that the children never left the factory at all, therefore they don't get to experience any of the modern comforts of the world as it grows and changes. While that's sad in and of itself, there's a level of manipulation to be had in keeping the children locked away in the past. This takes away even more of their own agency. Further down the page is a note written from the employee, PW, who owns the particular copy of the handbook we've been reading. They write, "It may be relevant here that Elliot's wife divorced him because he devoted all his life to the business. There's also something about a tragic death in his family. It always felt like he wanted to have a family within the factory, so his whole life could be here. I believe the opening of Playcare was part of that in many ways." Elliot is the founder of Playtime Co., and he opened it with the intention of creating toys to make children happy. PW seems to think that because Elliot lost his wife and later someone else important to him, that he decided to make the Playtime factory his home. That could very well be why he opened an orphanage to begin with, to have children and a family around him. If what PW says is the truth, this creates many new meanings for some of the experiments that happened in the factory. At the bottom of the page, the description of the orphanage continues. "Some of the children who live here come from difficult backgrounds and have trouble getting to sleep at night, which can keep the other children awake. We create an environment where they are guaranteed a good night's sleep, leaving them fresh for next day's activities." The word "guaranteed" is bolded here, and in a slightly larger font than the rest of the text on the page. From our knowledge of the game and the orphan's writing, we know that the Playtime staff means the red smoke that Catnap emits. The higher-up staff wants their employees to believe that the children of the orphanage were getting everything they needed. However, it feels a little dystopian. Children were given an artificial taste of the outside world with the dome. The handbook states, "Growing up in a toy factory means you don't have a lot of outside space, so we made the dome to compensate for that." The dome ceiling shows a bright blue sky in the daytime and changes to a moon and stars at night. The orphans were never getting any real sunlight, which all humans need to survive. Why prevent the children from getting this necessity, unless as another form of keeping them subdued and controlled? The description continues. "A generator which powers the whole Playcare department is housed in the ceiling. The control panel for this is concealed near the entrance of Home Sweet Home. It's hidden so the orphans don't interfere with it. Employees need the correct key access in order to use the elevator that takes them up to the generator room." What does PW have to say about all this? They scribble two notes at the bottom of the page. The first says, "Smiling Critters was all bound up with the Bigger Bodies initiative, and it links to Playcare. I wonder if there's a link between the education the orphans got in Playcare and the messages and morals from the cartoon show." The orphans had a terrible education. Miss Delight and her sisters were in charge of teaching the orphans. She was created specifically for Playcare and not as a toy to send to market. But why not hire a real teacher? Perhaps an actual teacher would have too much compassion for the kids in the factory, or even tried to question what Playtime was doing in Playcare. Instead, the children had to rely on a life-size doll to be their teacher. Miss Delight had all sorts of weird lessons too, like an after-school club dedicated to scaring people. PW seems concerned about the children learning the morals from the Smiling Critters cartoon. We get to see a part of this cartoon on the VHS tape announcing Catnap's recall. There's something unsettling and a little bit frightening about the cartoon. It's very clear that there aren't many very good morals to be learned from this. PW's second note explains, we created bigger bodies versions of each toy in the Smiling Critters line and assigned them to different parts of Playcare and the factory as a whole. Like Miss Delight and Catnap, larger versions of the Smiling Critters toys were created to work and maintain different areas of the factory. Catnap was assigned to Home Sweet Home and Miss Delight to the school. It's interesting to think about why none of the employees ever filled the role of teacher, guardian, and other things. Now it's starting to make sense why a biologist was hired to work at a toy factory. We got to look at a few pages from the orientation handbook. With a better inside look at the orphanage at Playcare, we've learned so much about the Bigger Bodies initiative and what the orphans were subjected to. It's likely the children were being manipulated so they'd be easier to experiment on and control. We saw this through Playtime's decision to keep the decoration of Home Sweet Home dated. They also prevented the children from having access to sunlight and removed any element of human interaction. In Playtime's eyes, they would rather take care of a child rather than a full-grown adult. What do you think about Playtime's decision to let toys take care of the children? Are toys like Catnap and Miss Delight qualified, or should they have taken a back seat? Let us know in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss any new content. Stay tuned for the next video, as we'll dive even deeper into the orientation book and how all of our new findings reveal something shocking.